Hello, my name is Nadine Ford Thompson. I graduated here in Milton Union in 1945. I'm the executive secretary of our Alumni Association, and I'd like to give you a bit of a history of our Alumni Association. And Pink Yvonne will finish it up. Our first graduating class was in 1883 and consisted of 2 women. The first alumni reception was not held until 4 years later in 1887 with a total graduate of 15 women. There weren't any men until about 2 years later. This is our 125th anniversary. Prior to 1965, the roster of graduates, names, addresses were held in a shoebox with names on 3x5 cards. Whenever a new secretary was appointed to the alumna, the shoebox was passed to the secretary. The names and addresses in the shoebox received the notices of the alumna. That was all. Ted Kashner, the class of 1939, was a past alumni president, decided that wasn't the proper way to keep our records and proceeded to gather a committee together to help track down each grad and their correct address. It took 3 years of detective work to gather the information, and they got all the names with the exception of 8 of all the graduates. Jack Dexter, the class of 1941, had the vision of a book with the history of our school and pictures of all the graduates of Milton Union. He and his committee were able to gather all but 2 pictures of the graduates necessary for the first 1967 Milton Union alumni album. And what a great book it was. We've heard stories after stories of how many arguments that alumni album settled. In 1968, we were able to purchase a mimeograph machine from the profits of the album to print the newsletter. Our banquet was always in the cafeteria. We would come upstairs for the program and dance. It was so hot down there with the cooking of the food, the lower ceilings, and everyone talking that several people had health problems. So we were finally able to have our banquet up here in the auditorium in 1970. In 1976, Yvonne joined me. 1978, we ran the 1883-1967 alumni album and printed a new album of 1968 through 1977. The celebration of our 100th graduation in 1983 was the alumna gave the first scholarship in the amount of $200. The scholarship money was generated from the sale of the alumni album. Nowadays, $200 wouldn't even buy a book. The year 1984 brought us a financial problem as the post office informed us that we were not allowed to use the school's mailing permit for our postage. Bud Hoover kept our newsletter fund going by selling drawing tickets at the banquet for all kinds of imaginary cars and boats and such. He was quite a salesman, as many of you remember, and certainly did help our newsletter fund. The spring of 1985, our used addressing machine, purchased in 1965 and kept together by Ted and Fred to keep it running, needed parts, but there were no replacement parts available. The stencils we used in the machine were no longer manufactured. That was a major problem. The executive board decided that a computer was the only answer. This would also solve the time-consuming job of sorting over 5,000 newsletters by hand. We also asked the members of the alumni for donations to cover the purchase of the equipment. In a matter of months, we had the money we needed. We were amazed and surprised, as we thought it would take a year or two to gather the money to buy the computer. The scholarship fund we are so proud of. In October of 1985, Clifton E. Brown, the class of 1923, met with the alumni trustees to discuss establishing an endowment to the scholarship fund in loving memory of his wife, Viola Evans Brown, class of 25. We discussed the criteria that we use for our scholarships, which met his guidelines. This was the beginning of our great scholarship program. Last year, we gave out 21 scholarships to members of the senior class, totaling $37,500. We have received a number of endowments since Clifton Brown's. The interest generated from each endowment is used for the designated scholarship. Our thanks to Bob Johnston, class of 1971, he worked through the legalization, and we received a 501c3 rating, nonprofit, from the IRS in 1993. This rating helped cut the cost of the postage for the newsletters, and all money donated to the Milton Union Alumni Association, Inc. is now tax deductible. Our purpose has changed over the years, from initiating each graduating class into the alumni to the organization, encouragement of class reunions, and awarding scholarships funded by our members. Thank you, thank you, thank you for your generation in helping the Milton Union Alumni Scholarship Program and our graduating seniors. That's all I have. I can't think of anything. I will later, probably. Pink does.
Okay. No, are we supposed to talk about our school time too and
Sure.
that? Okay.
Absolutely, that's why I asked.
All right. Everybody in West Milton is Pinky. And I graduated in 1971. And to keep along the lines of the alumni, Mrs. Code asked me when I was a senior if I would be willing to be the secretary for the alumni. And I said, well, I don't know. What do I have to do? And she said, well, you go to the banquet, you write down the notes of what happened, and then that's it. So I did. But back then, alumni was a little bit different. You wore formals, and the men wore suits and ties, and they had a dance afterwards. It was a big deal. It still is a big deal, but just a little bit different in the clothing. We started out at that, and then the next year I came and I read the minutes, and after that I thought, well, I'm done. And Nadine says, well, the person that was supposed to be the secretary wasn't going to be able to make it. Could I make it? So I said, yeah, okay. So I hurried up and got dressed and come back in and did the secretary stuff again. The next thing I know, Nadine's handing me a typewriter and some stencils, and she says, can you help me do these addresses? I said, well, yeah, I can do that. And it was an old typewriter, and the stencils, you had to wet them, And then you put them in the typewriter and you one-fingered so that you could get that key to strike hard enough to make that stencil. Well, after a few years of that, I took the stencils back and the typewriter, and I said, here, I got everything done. She goes, well, no, those are yours. You're it now. So I said, all right. So I did that for a few years, and then the alumni bought me an electric typewriter, which was a lot better because that made the key strike a little bit faster without having to do it one-fingered all the time. And then I was promoted up to executive secretary and assistant to the executive secretary, and I've been on the board ever since then. And it's been a joy. I get to see people that I haven't seen for a long time and teachers at alumni, and it's just a great time. We had problems for a while. We would use decorations in here for the alumni that were left over from prom. And there for a while, the prom thought it was really nice to use a big parachute in here. Well, that was neat, and it was really pretty looking, but after we got in here and we got maybe 400 or 500 people in here, all that heat from that parachute come down on everybody, and we were all having heat strokes after that. But that's been my affiliation with the alumni, and we really do appreciate everybody coming back every year and for the donations that they do give us. We do donate a book plate for the people who have passed away. We used to do books, but that was getting a little bit costly, so now we put book plates into the books that the school library purchases, and they have books in memory of the people that passed away. I started school in the church in kindergarten with Miss Dickey, and we were in the basement, and then first grade was started over in the primary building, so we had Miss North then. Then after that, we had to go to the McKinley building for 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And of course, we got to go across the street to the high school to eat our lunch and do gym and all those things. And it was really nice because we got to see all the bigger kids, and we thought we were big stuff then. But in 7th grade, we were supposed to come over here and do 7th and 8th grade all the way through 12. And that changed. So they built the new elementary building, and we got to spend 2 more years at the McKinley building, but we still got to come across the street. Then after that, our high school years were pretty good. We had a really good time, lots of dance things that went on with our school won a contest with Gary and the Hornets and Steve Kirk, and we had that down in the cafeteria, and that was a really fun time for that. We took dance lessons from Bob and Ruth Tinnerman, and that was always fun, too, learn new stuff and get to dance with all the guys that were there. So I think that's about all I have.
Very good. Very good.
Anybody else?
Yes.
I guess.
Go? Okay.
Hi, my name's Greg Kokesberger. Mrs. Coate did not ask me to be involved with the Alumni Association. My wonderful wife here did. So we've been doing this job for quite a while, and she does a pretty good job. I don't have a whole lot to say except for back then when we went to school, we graduated and come over here from the old McKinley building. That's where our primary and elementary school was, and we come over here to this big school here with the big people. So we had a pretty good time, but it was a wonderful mixture, I guess. But anyway, I guess probably the thing that I would say is if you want to come to the alumni banquet, to make sure that we have your proper address so we can send you the tickets and the newsletter, and I guess that's all I have to say.
I've got it. I might as well go. My name is Keith Widener, although I've been known as other names, some of which I would prefer not to mention. Some of my colleagues I can think of a Cuda and a Bugs and a Tweety and a lot of less complimentary names. I was happy with Fabe for a while. Later on it became Chief. I didn't feel demeaned by that. But my real name is Keith Widener. I was a teacher here for 33 years, subbed a couple more years. I was a student here for 12 years, and I have been a groundskeeper here. I've worn many, many hats in this place. As I look around this room right here holds many, many memories for me. For example, as I look to the right where the stage is now, I see the backboard where I tried to break up a fast break one time in the church league, and I dislocated my shoulder, and I have paid the penalty for that ever since. But in those days, the stage used to be over here on the north side of the room, and I have participated in quite a number of dramatic productions on that stage. I remember one in particular. I can't help mentioning this one. I was involved in some play. I happened at the same time to be the editor of the school newspaper, the Bulldog Bark, and I wrote an editorial on one occasion where I deplored the lack of mirrors in the boys' restrooms. I complained that we were losing out all the nubile maidens in our school to visitors from other schools simply because of a grooming problem, which could be solved if we'd had mirrors in our restrooms. So I raved on and on about this, and I happened to be on the stage where we're preparing previews of a dramatic production in front of the high school assembly, and Mr. Duncan at that time was the superintendent or the principal, I don't remember which. But nobody could give the stink eye the way Robert Duncan could. Oh, when he looked at you, you just sort of wilted. But while I was behind the curtain up on the stage, I could hear him addressing the student body, and he said something to the effect that the editor of our school newspaper, though well-intentioned, was misinformed. And so I was up there shrinking, and I was awfully glad that he couldn't see me then, or I would have wilted. But that was one of my memories about this stage. At the other end of the room, it was much closer this direction than before they added on all these other things. But the thing that I think I miss the most about this room is the concourse that used to be along the south wall here. You come into the gym through the same door that we have now, but it right inside the bleachers were over here, theater-type seats with armrests and the whole 9 yards. And all the way across here, and we could watch whatever was going on out here. But out in that concourse, there were first there was the door that went down to the girls' locker room, and then the next door was a women's restroom, and right about in the middle was what we called the candy booth, where we sold, the junior class held concessions there. Then there was a boys' restroom, and then the stairs down to the boys' locker room. How long I can ramble forever, but one of the things that I remember about the concourse and the candy booth was during World War II, there wasn't really much available to sell in the candy booth. There was a shortage of chocolate and sugar and all that kind of thing, so we sold cough drops. Vicks didn't go very well, but Luden's always tasted kind of candy-like. And we had ice cream, of course, but it was a fun thing that we did in those times. Let's see. Oh, there are other things here that I ought to go into, but I think I'll pass on that. But I have memories about virtually every room in this building. I have either been a student in one of them or all of them, or I've taught in most of them. Barb was in one of my classes. I think the first year of teaching she was in my class. It was Tinnerman then. Well, I better get rid of this before somebody else loses out. I'll come back if I have a chance.
Yes. Okay. I'm Eugenie Dennis Markley, and I graduated in 1953. I moved here in August of 1949 from Miamisburg, so I was a newcomer for my freshman year in high school. And I came from a large city school to this small school, which was quite a shock. And it was really different. And the first thing, I had locker number 17, which was right here on this floor, which was very unusual because where I came from before, you didn't have lockers like that. You shared everything. And I had my own locker, which was really unusual. And being where I was with all the freshmen right there. We were right in the middle of everything, and I couldn't believe all the boys up and down the hall here. And every time I turned around, there was just a whole line of boys up and down the hall. This one right here was always behind me with his red hair, which is no longer red. Anyway, that was the first year because he graduated that year. He'll talk in a few minutes. But then I had a lot of fond memories in this school, a lot of nice teachers, and I really liked being here because everyone knew everyone. Everyone was friendly, and I was one of the city kids because I lived in town. I had a lot of friends out in the country. Shirley Spittler, who was our class president, became one of my best friends, and I used to go out on her farm and stay with her, which was a lot of fun because I had never been out on a farm before to stay. But anyway, to get on with the alumna, after I graduated and started coming to the alumna, I love the alumna. I have never missed an alumna. The history that you learn at the alumna is just wonderful. Angie Crew, who graduated in 1913, became a missionary to Japan. She was in Kobe, and Kobe was where one of the earthquakes struck, and the school that she helped found in Kobe was one of the schools that was destroyed. I just feel so badly about that. But Angie, during World War II, was a missionary who was on furlough. And in Miamisburg, we had religious education. And Angie, believe it or not, was one of my religious education people who came in to instruct us. And when I moved to West Milton, lo and behold, here was Angie walking down the street of West Milton. I was thrilled out of my mind to get to know Angie again. And I got to know Angie later in life before she eventually passed away. And it's just getting to know people like that in West Milton, Ohio. The history that you get to hear at the alumna. There was a graduating class in 1923 that told of coming to the night that they graduated from high school. They paved the road from West Milton city limits to Pig Eye, which happens to be the corner of 48 and Frederick Garland Road. The graduating class that night, their party was roller skating all night up and down 48. And they told what fun that was. You don't hear history like that anymore. But there was just all kinds of history that you hear at the alumna and the people that you meet. Bernie Castle, who just passed away last week at 93. He was one of the most fun men I ever met. He could tell jokes one right after another for a solid hour. And he would sit and absolutely keep everybody in stitches at the tables at the alumna while we were waiting for everything else to go on. Just the wonderful people that you meet that you wouldn't meet otherwise from the other classes. People have to come to the alumna to meet people like this. And then our own classmates. We have wonderful people. I graduated in 1953. One of my classmates is a retired brigadier general from the Air Force Academy. I have a classmate who was in Pretoria in Africa at the time that they were killing some of the British missionaries. At that time, some of their friends were killed, and he was held there for 6 weeks without being able to see his wife, who was being held in another part of Africa. It's just unbelievable the things that people have gone through. And people from West Milton have been all over the world, our classmates. We have wonderful people who've graduated from here who've gone on to serve all over the world. You just have to come back to see them. And I would encourage everybody to support your alumna, support your scholarship fund, because our kids are going to be doing great things with their lives.
You know that I did Angie Cruz life down at the cemetery walk. Did you know that I did that?
Oh,
I portrayed her, and I did all that investigation, everything that you said, and they rebuilt that building that was destroyed by an earthquake and named it after her.
yes, I know that.
Yeah.
Angie, and then see, well, I don't, is that still on?
No.
Well,
Well, it's not going to be shown though. We're just talking.
yeah. Well, I was just going to say, Angie belonged to the United Church of Christ, and they had a Sunday school class there called Angie's Crew, and they did fundraising all the time to send money to support her kids over there, and I just thought that was wonderful. The Empress of Japan was a friend of hers, which was unheard of in those days. Yes. I nominated her to the Hall of Honor because I thought she was so wonderful.
She sure does.
She was my role model.
Are you ready?
Ready.
Camera action.
We've been together 59 years.
I'm Richard Dick Markley, class of 1950 here at Milton Union, and a former president of the association. I did a couple other jobs over the years. At times I've had the memorial part of the program, and one time years ago we had to do the senior class. Now we have a school teacher that usually does, or the advisor for the class that usually does the introduction to the seniors. But I did that one year, and I remember it was a year that Mr. Osborne had been the superintendent of schools at that time. And I told the class that they could, now that they've graduated from Milton Union, they could call Mr. Osborne Bob. Well, that went over like a lead balloon. They're not going to call Mr. Osborne Bob, and neither would I call him that. But it was a lot of fun. Why I'm here today rambling, because I don't have notes like Nadine did. I should have. But so I will ramble on. I've attended every one of the alumni since I graduated, and probably a good reason is what Janie says, to listen to those class presidents or the people that are representing their class tell about what they did when they were seniors and what was happening in the school system back then. However, I'm also the one that recommended to the alumni that we put a time limit on those talks. Because some of them got to be long time lectures, and it got a little hard on to sit there and listen for all that time. But it is fun to do that. Bert Pemberton was the longtime treasurer of the Alumni Association, and he had attended every one of the association meetings since he had graduated. Winston Vore, a classmate of mine, we said, we're going to beat Bert Pemberton's record. We're going to attend every one of them. Well, Winston dropped out after a few years, but I'm still trying to beat Bert Pemberton's record. I think I've run out of time, out of things to say.
You're good. You think of something.
Please?
You're still good.
I'm still good, but I can't think of anything.
Okay.
I've got a mental block.
Okay. Well, we can come back to you.
Hold on a minute.
Yeah.
What was I going to say? Oh, okay. I'm back at it. It was mentioned earlier by one that we had to dance afterwards. And I remember when, and we've already mentioned Bud Hoover's name, but I've got to mention Bud Hoover's name again. Bud was not a graduate of Milton Union, but he sure was a supporter of the Milton Union High School and the Alumni Association. And as Nadine said earlier, he sold more tickets than anyone, probably all of us combined. He sold more of them at the time that he was selling tickets. But during the dances, they had a foxtrot. And he and his wife Helen would do the foxtrot. And if you've ever seen them do it, it's 360 degrees around the gym floor, and just don't get in their way because they really moved. And I guess that was the foxtrot, but I could never dance it like that. That's for sure. Well, to finish up on mine, the greatest experience in coming to the Alumni Association is the people. Coming and seeing people you haven't seen in a year. The only time you do see them is here at the Alumni Association in the past year. Some of them come from great distances, too. And going back a few years to the McKinley Building, I want to say that I started in the McKinley Building when everyone was in that building. And when those seniors would come out of that top floor and come downstairs, they looked like giants. I never saw such big people as they were at that time. You wonder how could we all fit into that building, but we did.